2 words, Grunt Fantasy. An idea which has captured the gaming space for the past quarter year now. In particular, it has been used as a way to describe and critique Helldivers' kind of gameplay style. There are a lot of videos about it at this point, so that's not what I'm here to do. Rather than that, I would like this video to expand upon the definition of a grunt fantasy beyond the standard soldier, and really bring us to the root of why we as a collective find this idea so attractive, and why it's very easy to get wrong. So, what is this concept in the first place? Well, it's essentially the idea that in games like Halo, Space Marine, Gears of War, and any other game that takes place in an expansive universe which features a lot of, war, rather than playing as the heavy hitters, the hero units as they have been described, you play as these guys. These randoms who have nothing to do with the main character other than supporting them from the sidelines. Considering how popular it is with this topic, we can use Helldivers in particular as the baseline for this idea. In Helldivers, while you may not be the lowest of the low, you are still treated like it. Expendable units that are there to get a job done and get out. There are almost never any heroics unless you are exhibiting good team synergy. Or you're a meta-goblin who solo super helldives. In games like Halo, you don't really have to do a lot of planning, unless you're playing something like Legendary with all skulls on or something. Otherwise, you can just run into any group of enemies and gun them down. However, in Helldivers, if you run into a large group of enemies with no plan, you will die, no question about it. This even extends to the lower difficulties, as unlike other games, Helldivers will not reduce damage when lowering the difficulty, only enemy count. Now, the developers of Helldivers have received a lot of scrutiny with the label Grunt Fantasy attached to it, which comes primarily from the nerfs to the weapons that the developers have implemented over time, and the buffs to the enemies. If I'm being honest though, I really don't mind the nerfs. The only thing that I found bad was the constant ragdolling, an effect of the devs adding a weapon type meant to be stationary to a fast-moving enemy. It might be because I haven't been that interested in purchasing war bonds, but other than the ragdolling, I still had a lot of fun playing the game even with the nerfs. And another game that I had a lot of fun playing this year was the lesser known and also fairly unbalanced one known as Hunt Showdown. Alright, before I say anything positive about this game, on the off chance that the devs would watch this for some reason, devs, please nerf the bow. This shouldn't be possible in any game. It's either the matchmaking or the bow that's gotta change, and I'm not kidding when I say that this single weapon is the only reason why I don't play Hunt more often. With that little rant out of the way, Hunt Showdown is absolutely an amazing example of a grunt fantasy. Most of the weapons are, in fact, balanced, and have a relatively similar time to kill, similar to how guns work in real life. You and every person you encounter are fragile and dangerous, which is just how the hunters are meant to be, even in the lore. Barring any special skins, you're not meant to be a special person or a protagonist, you're just trying to get by. When completing a bounty, you get hunt dollars, and I assume that's the reason everyone there is hunting the bounty in the first place. They're just trying to make money. I believe that although there is a lack of any heroic characters that overshadow the players, it can still fit the definition of a grunt fantasy. And the players are still just that, grunts. And it's all the more gratifying when you, a grunt, prevail. If you know anything about this channel, you know that I love Half-Life. I personally consider it to be amongst the best franchises in gaming as a whole. Personal bias aside, however, Half-Life, in particular Half-Life 1 and its expansions, are a good example of what could loosely be considered a grunt fantasy. To a lesser extent, Half-Life 1 sees you playing as a generic scientist, and so for the parts of the game that remain grounded in the facility, I would definitely put it in that category. However, what I believe utilizes the concept to a better extent are the expansions, Opposing Force and Blue Shift. They see you playing as Adrian Shepard and Barney Calhoun, both an HECU soldier and a security guard, respectively. While we know now that Barney is in fact a main character, at the time he was really just another random security guard that happened to, luckily, get into contact with one of the scientists who would be successful in escaping. As for Adrian Shepard, we really don't know much about him, but we do know that he was more directly a part of the G-Man's plans, being put into stasis because of it. Overall, I think the idea or concept of Grunt Fantasy in the Half-Life series is less so tied to being expendable and more so tied to being lucky. One of its most famous quotes is, of course, that the right man in the wrong place makes all the difference. This can mean a lot of things, but under this lens, I believe it means that regardless of how powerful or weak you are, under the right circumstances, in the end, you can always prevail. Another game that I think does a really good job at portraying the importance of circumstances is Project Zomboid. Project Zomboid is, as far as I'm aware, today's most realistic video game rendition of the zombie apocalypse. I don't think there's any game where you've ever been any more of a normal guy. When you start off, unless you're doing some crazy modded run, you are a weak, puny, average human. In fact, unless you're playing with friends, you are actually the only weak, puny, and average human still left. Because of this, you have to use your brain for almost any dangerous interaction in this game. If you're planning a trip, you gotta pack food and water. If you're trying to take this building, bring multiple weapons in case your one breaks. If you want to drive a car, well, first you're gonna have to find one that's in good condition, then you have to have gas, available replacement parts, replacement tires, and the tools to fix it just in case it breaks down. And of course you have to do all that while all the power and electricity is either out or is going to go out at any time. And pray that you weren't in a population center when you woke up, because then your first goal is to just leave. Every part of the game is like this, and because of that, I believe it allows us to even further loosen the idea of a grunt fantasy to be less of a concept relegated to shooters only, but any situation in which you just aren't special. No one is, and you're the only one who can decide whether or not you prevail. No Man's Sky is a game that I have invested a pretty good amount of time in. And, well, there are a lot of reasons for that. However, one of the biggest reasons I purchased it was actually because of Star Wars. See, way back when I was very little, I was a huge fan of the Clone Wars animated series, and I still am today, as well as a fan of the whole prequel era as a whole. And while I was aware of games like Battlefront at the time and found them fun, as I grew older, I had seen these scenes in the Clone Wars that seemed to be just people. I heard filler comments about things like obtaining a ship license, obtaining Republic credits, and even purchasing and customizing your own ship. And it kind of sparked an idea in my head. Something like, what if there was a game where you could just live in that universe as whatever you want? Getting to be something like a bounty hunter, or a shipbuilder, or a ship parts seller, and more. I searched for many games that scratched this itch. I tried EVE Online, and quickly got bored for the lack of anything other than being in the ship. I tried Elite Dangerous, which was fun, but had a disappointing out-of-ship experience. I even tried some actual Star Wars games, which were not exactly what I was looking for. I searched all over. I even tried Roblox games, which were appropriately underwhelming. And then I tried No Man's Sky. And boy did I come at a good time, near the exact release of the Voyager update. When I laid my eyes on the Corvette that they showcased in the game, I instantly knew that this was the game that I was looking for. In it, you can make money in a large variety of ways, from, being a pirate and hunting bounties to my preferred occupation, finding old ship parts and technology buried inside random planets and selling them to make ships. And while I don't know much about the lore, the existence of this game makes me question, can we call this game a Grunt Fantasy? Well, no, right? It's not a shooter, it's not about war, you aren't exactly a grunt, but you're a normal person. In this game, you don't just choose if, but also how you will prevail. Bringing the concept a little closer to its roots, though, we have Arc Raiders. Arc Raiders has quickly become my favorite game of 2025, only sharing that spot with Helldivers because I cannot decide which one I like better. This game is more than a generic extraction shooter, it's been described as a social experiment, a personality test, and much more. In this game, you play as a raider, nothing more and nothing less. If there's any example of a game that executes the idea of a grunt fantasy correctly, it is this one. Even the weakest of the Arc can mess you up badly. If you let yourself fall into complacency, you become worthless, just another dead raider, just another piñata of loot, just another casualty of the Arc. When it comes to Grunt Fantasy, Arc Raiders takes the angle of strength in numbers. Alone, you have to be a lot more evasive, more strategic, more afraid. As a team, though, it becomes a lot more combative. You have to be good at not just basic aim, although that helps, but strategy. Are you rotating to a different location? Put down a mine behind you. Do you want to be alerted of a raider's presence? Leave that Arc turret alone, it makes a lot of noise. Want to make sure your enemies can't run away? Bring some gas mines. Want to block off an area so you have some time to heal? Bring some fire bombs. Want to use Arc to your advantage? Bring lure grenades or a snitch scanner. Do you have absolutely none of these things? That's okay, because if you're smart enough, even with free loadouts, you can bring down even the most kitted out of raiders. Because at the end of the day, you're all just raiders, and every raider has the potential to prevail. Grunt Fantasy is, at the current moment, a nebulous idea. Some believe that it is a fun killer that exists simply to fuel your ego. Others believe that it is a concept that has not existed for long enough, one that all franchises like this should explore. Most fall somewhere in between. When I look at this idea, though, I see the recontextualization of something that already exists, from games like No Man's Sky to even games like The Sims. All are games that go over the topic of being a regular individual or managing regular people. Even a game as popular as Minecraft partially does this in its survival mode, even if severely lacking in some places. You may have noticed that I've been ending each section of the video with the word PREVAIL, and that's because it's really the essence of this idea as a whole. The reason why people like Grunt Fantasies isn't just because it makes the game generically harder, it's because it makes the game more complex than just shoot and win. The player has to put in the effort and the intellect that is necessary to survive. As one would with a non-shooter game like Minecraft, where you take the time to build complex farms or mob grinders or anything that would serve to benefit you. Or in No Man's Sky, where you would have to thoughtfully decide what you want to do and determine the steps needed to do it, a Grunt Fantasy is simply the desire to have that style of game, that complexity, be transferred over into the form of a shooter. Devs often get this wrong, thinking players want the game to be harder, point blank, and so they make it harder. They make everything not fun anymore, when, in reality, what is usually required for an effective Grunt Fantasy is complexity. And that's the thesis of this essay, if you will. A Grunt Fantasy isn't a tool of ego, nor is it something that should be overindulged in. It's the desire to prevail in absolute spite of one's own weaknesses, in absolute spite of the odds put up against you, and in absolute spite of our human nature. That emotion, that catharsis, is the ultimate end goal of the Grunt Fantasy. No! Thank you everyone so much for watching this far into the video. If you enjoyed, as is often said, like and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content so much that you wish to propagate the creation of more, I just opened a Patreon, which you can subscribe to if you want for benefits like early access to videos, a shoutout, and much more. Additionally, you can also buy something from this store on Amazon as a one-time purchase if you want to support me without subscribing to a monthly membership. Now, if you're a pre-existing viewer of this channel, you've probably noticed that a few changes, like, the whole rebrand and also my editing. And that's because I've switched to Premiere Pro for editing, which has so far gone extremely well. I hope that this change will allow me to bring even better videos to you guys in the future, especially when it comes to my next end of month video. With that being said, thanks for watching, and goodbye.